Hello and welcome to Caucasian Journal video interviews. Today we are especially delighted to meet with Inger ENKVIST, who is Professor Emerita from the Lund University in Sweden. Professor ENKVIST is a distinguished Swedish educator, a writer and commentator, one of the most renowned commentators on education policies, and an expert in Spanish literature. Many countries have attempted to import, so to say, elements of the Nordic education model. Do you think it is generally possible to replicate this model abroad, outside of the Nordic countries, in different cultural and social contexts? What do you think?
Yes and no, as always. I think Nordic education was very successful, for example, some decades ago, and it built on a long democratic tradition, or also on pre-democratic collaboration within society. Also, it also built on trust between the citizens and between the citizens and the state. So there are a number of historical factors which are important. And we have seen that lately, because we have had a lot of immigration from countries outside Scandinavia. And those pupils, and some of those pupils, not all of them, but some of them, have difficulty integrating into a Nordic way of looking at relationships between teachers and students. For example, we have a rather mild way of giving orders. They are orders, but they are framed as questions or suggestions. And some pupils do not understand that. So we could say that there was a Swedish model. There was a traditional Swedish model up to mid-20th century. Then there was a Swedish or Nordic welfare model, which worked relatively well for a couple of years. And then we have had to take into consideration if we need to make adjustments to what was established now that we are in a new situation.
What currently are the weak points of the Nordic education model?
I would say it has to do with the kind of with political utopianism and something that started in the 60s in Sweden and in the United States, for example, in Britain. And it was to use education as a way of getting to a socialist society where everyone was equal. So using education not for education's sake, but for political reasons. And that seemed maybe attractive, but it had some very negative consequences. And I can take Sweden and Finland as examples. Everyone knows that Finland was the big champion of European education when the first PISA results came out, because it seemed that Finland could get very good results with a very Nordic way of conducting school business, with inclusive education, with a very mild way of disciplining the students, and with very mild kinds of restriction on the students. But we have now analyzed the Finnish situation, and we know a lot more about it. And several researchers have pointed out that the students that were about 15 years of age in the year 2000, they had really been educated by teachers who had done their formation, their studies, maybe in the 60s and 70s, and had those teachers had experiences from the bad years in Finnish history, from the Second World War. Those were the teachers who had educated those 15-year-old Finns that did so well in PISA. But after that success, Finland got richer. It was more of a welfare society. It had recently woken up to its new status as a high power educational state, and it started to implement reforms like other European or West European countries. And in Sweden, something similar happened, but it's more drawn out, so it's more difficult to see. But we had a very good education system up to 1962. And that's when we introduced the comprehensive school, the École unique, the one model only for all students, which was a socialist reform, of course. And we abolished, that same year, we abolished all other alternatives. Everyone should go, have the same education for up to 16 years of age. One curriculum, one schools, one type of teacher training. And that was contested at the moment. All teachers of upper secondary school protested, so don't introduce these reforms. But the politicians did not listen. Obviously, they thought that their program, or what they thought would be social cohesion, was more important. So the negative influences does not show until we are in the 80s and especially in the 90s. Everyone has noticed that quality is going down. The intent of the state to regulate everything is not giving the results we would like to see. Maybe we should try to organize or offer different kinds of education, all of them good in their way. So to let every kind of offer of education be as good as it can be, and then let the students choose between them. It's not more. It is not more expensive, and it would, I think, respond better to what the public wants and what is good for the country. One more thing that has happened since mid 20th century is that the school curriculum has become much more politicized. And I would like to see that the school offer includes curriculums that are not so politicized. And when I speak about politicization, it is the having social equality as a goal, not only having gender equality, having all kinds of gender issues that are topical today, having environmental concerns everywhere, and having multiculturalism as a political goal. All that has permeated the Swedish curriculum, as it has in most Western countries. So we are not different, but we are like other countries in this. But all these goals do lower the standards of knowledge, because they are supposed to be everywhere, and they take time and effort from other pursuits. And with these goals, school is not only a place of intellectual learning, it's also a place of social learning. And then when you have two goals at the same time, you diminish both of them. And my concern here is the intellectual learning. If you mix your intellectual goal with other goals, you you draw everything towards the bottom of the of your preferences. So I would like to have schools who did not have those as political goals. And I have, in a recent book, I have tried to show that if you have concerns about the environment, you should rather augment the number of hours in biology and chemistry so that the students understand the issues. If you are interested in other cultures, like multiculturalism, what you should do, in my view, is have more history, have more knowledge of religions, read more literature. Then you could form your own opinion about these things, etc. So what they do now is that they offer a solution to the students. They try to teach what should be, in my view, the conclusion.
If we look at the education model in European Union in general, and compare it to the Swedish, Finnish, or other Nordic models, still within European Union, do you think the Nordic approach still has strengths or advantages compared to the general European Union standards?
Your question has to do with the European Union, and the European Union, as it was when it started, was not to go into education. It was an economic collaboration. It promised to leave education at peace. Everything that was cultural was supposed to be dealt with by the states. But the European Union is in a bad position, in my view. It is entering in a lot of areas where they should not enter and where they do not really do anything good. I would like to see European education in a better state, and I do not think that the European Union has anything good to add. Can I also tell you an anecdote? It has to do with my ideals on European education. When I was very young, in the 70s, I went to Britain and I went to a museum that's called Tate Museum, and it was a hot summer day and there was a long queue to enter. And behind me in the queue, there was a Portuguese boy. And we started talking, and he had studied exactly the same program as I had studied in Sweden. So Sweden was a social democratic state, and Portugal was just a couple of years away from leaving the Salazar regime. And we had studied both Latin, a smattering of Greek, ancient Greek, history, European history, and the history of our country, literature, European literature, and the literature of our country. And we had studied English, French, and a bit of German as the European standard languages. And a bit of philosophy, a bit of history of the religions, a bit of psychology, but those were, well, short courses. But essentially, we had both had a European humanistic education, which was practically the same. I would like to say that that was European education before the progressives entered like the elephants in a china shop, as you say. So for so-called democratic reasons, they did away with what was our common heritage. And now we have teachers who have gone through this new school, parents who have gone through this new school, teacher training who is still set on all these ideological issues. And we have added an important number of students from other cultures who are not at all interested in the European heritage, that they have other goals. So we have complicated the situation, and we have for a long time lived on the results of our earlier very high standards of education. But this is getting thinner and thinner. and we will have to do something about it. If we want to defend our way of life in Europe, we must defend, or we must sustain, our educational level. And our politicians are not quite up to the task. This question that you are raising about European education, I feel it very deeply, because my personal interest in education is languages, and its history, and its literature, and its philosophy, etc. So they have done away with all the subjects that are dear to my heart. Exactly what I like, what I value, has been devalued by the bureaucrats.
The public in our region largely identifies themselves with European values generally, and consider themselves as European nations, which is very important. But still, I think people should understand in better detail what the European values are and what they should expect as they little by little integrate with the European Union. And what you are saying is quite important in this sense, because in fact, it contradicts the general expectations which people have here. Maybe we could talk a little bit about how the current state of European Union might influence the national education policies, especially in the countries which are in the process of integration.
If Georgia has a rather more traditional education, it should not do away with that education, because a number of European countries will tend to not exactly go back to that, but they will tend to introduce more elements from traditional education. The Western societies are at a relatively good situation, not because of their educational system, but in part in spite of living on fruits from yesterday. So do not take what we do now as your goal, but look at more principles that are more profound.
Well, thank you very much for your excellent contribution.
It has been nice talking to you, and I'm very pleased to collaborate and to help Georgia in any, or Armenia in any way I can. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you again. It's been a great pleasure for us.
Thank you.
We cover what matters. Caucasian Journal.